advanced science in the Bible. In the Old Testament, the Jewish nation is singled out as unique amongst nations. There were certain things that were expected of the Jews, according to the Mosaic Law, that were not expected of other nations. Even today, there are Jewish persons who follow kosher dietary guidelines and retain from work on Saturdays. These uniquely Jewish behaviors make and made them, the Jewish people, stick out like a sore thumb to the surrounding culture. What adult male would ordinarily opt for circumcision, for example, unless he really thought God wanted him to do that? So that would be considered an odd behavior, or an unusual behavior. So they stick out like a sore thumb. So what does all of this have to do with contemporary science? Well, if we assume the law of Moses was really the law of God, as opposed to Moses, we would not be surprised if a knowledge of later scientific insight was betrayed therein, in the Mosaic Law. Moses would obviously not have known of later scientific discoveries. If he mentions them, albeit by indirect and unconscious prerequisite, in his law, then we must suppose, or we may suppose, that such knowledge comes ultimately from God instead of Moses. So then, for example, in the law of Moses, there are certain instructions for ceremonial washing or cleansing. A cooking pot is to be cleansed with both running water and with scrubbing. Now, we take it for granted today that it's not good to cook with dirty pots and pans. But we are living in an age in which microscopic germs have been discovered and studied. And we can actually look at those germs under a microscope, which Moses was not able to do because there were no microscopes, obviously. I am told that even up into the Middle Ages, a lot of people were dying because of unnecessary infections which resulted from the unsanitary methods of doctors. Once the doctors started washing their hands, however, infection and fatality drastically decreased. So the Mosaic Law presupposes a knowledge of germs and infection. Similarly, there are various laws related to the ceremonial handling of lepers. The bubonic plague was spreading in the Middle Ages like, well, a plague. Then one day someone got the idea to take the Bible more seriously, and so started segregating bubonic plague infectees as though they were biblical lepers, as prescribed in the Mosaic Law. And by doing this, Western civilization was plausibly saved from extinction. Again, the segregation of patients with communicable diseases is something we take for granted today, but not so in the ancient world. Here again we see how far ahead of time Moses was, far ahead of his time. So far ahead, in fact, that Moses could not himself have been the source of that knowledge. And why the kosher laws? Well, pork is a rather dirty animal, which is forbidden in the kosher regulations. It bathes in its own feces. That's pretty dirty. And without modern refrigeration, botulism was a particular danger. And then animals, which are also considered non-kosher, a non-kosher dish. Those animals, like lobsters, are scavengers and so are relatively unhealthy. But again, Moses must have been unaware of such modern notions. Now, aside from the Mosaic Law, there seems to be a more explicit knowledge of later science within the Bible itself, outside of the Mosaic laws. Ironically enough, this is found, I would say, primarily in the early chapters of Genesis. And it's ironic because most people would be startled by hearing such a claim. It is vitally important that we interpret Genesis correctly at this point. One common error is to unintentionally presume the book of Genesis was, in effect, written in English originally. It was written in Hebrew, however, so we need to look at the Hebrew as opposed to the translated English to understand the true meaning. As I mentioned elsewhere, day in Genesis 1 is the Hebrew word yom, Y-O-M. And the Hebrew dictionary defines yom as either a 24-hour day or a long period of time. So if we come to the text and say, well, it's saying the world was created in 6 days, that does not necessarily mean in Hebrew that that was 6 24-hour periods. Another mistake people commonly make, and this is with respect to Genesis 1 to 3 in particular, but the Bible as a whole would fit this as well. This other mistake is to interpret the Bible in accordance with their childhood religious education. It is not uncommon, I think, for people to attend Sunday school classes as a young child, but as they get older, they abandon, quote, organized religion, unquote, and move on with their lives. Then, when they go to college and learn about science, they may come back to the Bible just for the heck of it. But they now interpret it not like mature adults, but like they were 5 years old in a Sunday school class. Now, I don't say this to insult anyone. It is a natural and common error, so you are in good company if you have fallen prey to this yourself. And I think we all do fall prey to this error of interpretation. But I do wish to point out the interpretive error. There is no theologian or biblical exegete of which I am aware who pictures Noah's Ark with a cartoonish design and giraffes hanging out of the windows. The Bible, that's the kiddie Sunday school immature interpretation. The Bible itself even encourages us to, quote, put away childish things, unquote, once we become adults. All right, so what does the text of Genesis say? That's the question. It says that a finite time ago, the universe began to exist. But this is precisely the same thing that mainstream scientific cosmology tells us. The standard Big Bang model is that a finite time ago, the universe began to exist. Science says X, but the Bible said it first, so modern cosmology is borrowing from the Christian tradition, in a manner of speaking. Or we could say it we could say this instead. The Bible contains advanced science. It's very telling how the unbeliever in the Bible, as the Word of God, usually responds to this line of evidence. It is very telling. It is to deny science altogether. So why is this telling? Because these same skeptics, many of them, shall appeal to science in an attempt to refute creationism. And yet biological science, including evolution, is on less certain grounds than the science of physics. I am not saying that biology is unreliable, only that it is not on as sure a ground as physics. In physics, we can explain everything, more or less, with precise equations. Biology, by contrast, by its very nature, is not subject to mathematical description, as subject to mathematical description as physics is. The point is to appeal to science to support one's view when science agrees with one's views, but then to reject science when it conflicts with one's views is fallacious and unfair. What is good for the goose is good for the gander, after all. All the more so when one appeals to a somewhat weaker science to debunk a somewhat stronger science. And we will end here for today because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to have to break this into 2 parts, this section. Thank you.